Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney. That's Nick Zararis. And Nick, it is that time of the offseason where we go through each division in our division series preview. We've done the Pacific, the Central, the Atlantic, and now it is time for the Metro.
This used to be the best division in hockey year in and year out. In the mid-2010s, when you had Pittsburgh, Washington, and the Rangers, all bona fide Stanley Cup contenders, this division used to be really miserable. The Flyers had a couple nice iterations in there as well in the mid-2010s where they had a couple nice seasons. That bottom half was usually pretty soft. Carolina, up until Brind'Amour took over, was pretty weak. Columbus, one or two nice iterations under Torts. But now it kind of feels like we've reached a tipping point where the Atlantic is definitely better. And I think we talked about this a lot last year as it was going along. And we'll talk about the Rangers a little bit today, more in depth next week for a full Rangers preview. But this division was begging for someone to do anything in the second half of the year. The Devils won the third spot in this division with 91 points last year. 91 standings points got you a divisional playoff spot in the Eastern Conference last year. That's how bad this division was. I think part of the reason Washington was able to have the season they were last year, they were in the mix for a President's Trophy for a long stretch of it, was simply because they were beating up on the other teams in this division. Now, that's not to denigrate. Washington has a decent team. I wouldn't say they're Stanley Cup good, but a really nice collection of talent that against the league's mushy middle and bad, which is, almost 2/3 of the league. If you want to be really a stickler for it, they're probably 20 to 25 teams that Washington is more talented than. And more often than not, if you're the more talented team, you just go out there and do what you're supposed to. You're going to put things together. I think Washington is really interesting in the respect that we'll talk about the Ovi hangover when we get to Washington. They'll be the last team we hit on, but this division feels like it's Carolina's to lose. We're all very skeptical of the Devils being able to stay healthy. You have no idea what to expect from the Rangers. Washington is a good team, but I don't think they're the most talented. And then you've got teams like the Islanders, Pittsburgh, and Philly, who are all pretty bad. Columbus, we think, is on the upward trajectory, but would we be shocked if the team without goaltending for the last 5 years continues to not get over the hump because its goaltending is 900 flat? This division is really, I don't want to say ugly, but it's not very good. It's very unimpressive. If I had to handicap it, I would say of the four divisions, this is probably the division least likely to produce the Stanley Cup champion of the four. I think in the Atlantic, Florida is clearly far and away the best. I think Dallas, Colorado, or Winnipeg could win the cup out of the Central, and then Vegas in the West, I think, is better than anyone in the Pacific, is better than anyone in this division. So I think there's a lot to chew on. We can start with the Flyers, who were the worst team in this division last year, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, the Flyers, who bring in Rick Tocchet, who bring in Trevor Zegras, who could not defend at all last year, who played two KHL goalies and just fed them to the Wolves last year. There's no other way to say it. Urson and Tarasov just got absolutely fed to the Wolves last year. And the Flyers should be a little bit better defensively. Rick Tocchet makes that his thing. I mean, if you have Elias Pettersson only producing 40 points in a season, you would suppose defense was part of it. I do think he got a little bit too much credit for the season they had 2 years ago when they made the playoffs. I think a lot of that was just a perfect storm of environmental factors. I also think it's very funny how winning Coach of the Year almost guarantees you get fired in the short term because you're generally overachieving as opposed to building something sustainable. But the Flyers should be better than the Penguins. They should be better than the Islanders. Anything beyond that, I'd be extremely skeptical. I think this team is probably a lot closer to picking first overall than they are making the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think they probably go under their number of 81.5 this upcoming season. They have the capacity to be fun purely on talent because of guys like Michkov, but Rick Tocchet doesn't like fun. I think if you know anything about Rick Tocchet, he's as anti-fun as it gets. So the Flyers should be a fun team, but I doubt they will be. I think they are clearly the 6th or 7th best team in this division, and they've got a long way to go still.
They have the pieces to be a fun team, right? They have Michkov and they have, Zegras could maybe be fun for them. But yeah, this team isn't going anywhere, and this is going to be a growing pains type of year for their young guys. This is the type of year for guys like Bobby Brink, guys like, Nikita Grabenkin, guys that are, that are here to show Philadelphia and the rest of the NHL too what they can do individually. And that, when you have a lot of guys on your roster like that, it doesn't usually lead to team success, because that means if everyone has something to prove individually at, age 21, 22, 19, whatever, they don't have the mileage nor the NHL experience to be like, okay, I know what I can do. Everybody else knows I can do. Now we're here to win. And the Flyers are going to maybe surprise some teams. They're like one of those kind of gray area teams where they could beat Florida on a rainy December day and then lose to San Jose 6-4, right? Like this is that kind of team this year. And they're going to be fun. Like this is definitely a team that I would put on ESPN Plus, because they have a lot of young talent. They could surprise people. They could do some damage, but long term, they don't have a goalie. I don't like their depth. I don't like their blue line really either. And I don't see where they're going to get the points from in order to seriously contend for a playoff spot. But I do like the future of this team if they continue to build on the young talent that they have.
The question I have is, if and you said it right there, they have the pieces to eventually be a good team. Does Rick Tocchet understand his job is to marshal this group to that phase? Or does he think he's going to be the coach for when they are eventually good? Because I think that is going to inform a lot of the decision-making, because that's what John Tortorella was supposed to do the last few years he was there in Philadelphia, was marshal this younger team along, get them to a point that, okay, we have the pieces we want to build around. Now we need to start pushing chips in. The Devils did this with like Andre Palat, trading for Jonas Siegenthaler, or signing Dougie Hamilton. I think the Flyers are still probably a year or two away from pushing chips in and spending serious money or trading for pieces, but they need to start making progress now. Like, they kicked the can down the road a little bit, trading Farabee and trading Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost last year, which kind of weird. Like, those are solid NHL players. You didn't get anything amazing in return. The Flyers have a lot of questions. There's the hater in me really wants this to go bad, because I think Rick Tocchet is incredibly overrated, but he's friends with all of the right people in the media, so he constantly gets his name in these cycles. The Canucks were a disaster last year. There was an outright mutiny in the locker room between the captain, the de facto captain, JT Miller, and the best player on this team, Elias Pettersson. And he basically threw his hands up, and they told JT Miller to go home for a week, how much of an asshole he was. And that was the resolution. There was no actual resolution, just go away for a week. So I'm skeptical of Rick Tocchet as a coach, but the Flyers have enough talent that they could be interesting. They need to get goalie right. Granted, we've been saying that since Ron Hextall retired from playing professional hockey, but they need a goalie. It's really straightforward.
Sure. This is Robert Esch erasure. Okay. Like, this is, by the way, this is how you know how diabolical we are about this sport. I'm pulling out Robert Esch in 2025.
They had one good Ray Emery year in there. They had one half decent season of Brizgalov. They've had. I mean, Carter Hart was like a 906 goalie 5 years ago for them, and they were talking about him like he was Bernie Parent. They were talking about, this is the next guy. This is the next guy. He's going to be the goalie for Team Canada. He had one good season. Like, I get it. When you're starved, when you are hungry, a can of a box of Kraft mac and cheese is delicious. It's always good, but when you're starving, it feels like it's a Michelin star meal. Okay, next up, the other team in the state of Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh Penguins, who, after a year of Kyle Dubas stubbornly trying to keep them in their window of contention, they gave Yari that extension. They signed Ryan Graves. They're eating shit now. They are taking it on the chin, and they are going to be bad. If they trade Brian Rust, if they trade Erik Karlsson, if they trade Rickard Rakell, it could be even worse. I think the Penguins understand where they are now. They have a prospect goalie that they're optimistic about, but is probably a year or two away from being an NHL starter. This bottom six is diabolically bad. Yeah. This defense is, even with Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang, who are both probably going to end up in the Hall of Fame. Erik Karlsson for sure. Chris Letang probably. This defense is horrendous.
He will. It would be a shock to me if Chris Letang was on the Hall of Fame.
this defense is horrendous, even with those guys. The goaltending situation is abominable. They have a first-time head coach in Dan Muse. The most interesting narrative about the Penguins is, will Sidney Crosby get tired of this? That's really all there is to talk about when it comes to the Penguins this upcoming year. I expect them to be in the mix for Gavin McKenna. I think they probably trade at least one, if not two, of Raquel Carlson and Brian Rust. And this team is going to be ugly on paper, just outright awful. And that's what you got to do, unfortunately, in today's game. If you want to get to where you want to be, you got to wear it on the chin for a year or two. And for Pittsburgh, who made the playoffs for 15 straight years, the longest active streak in the NHL for a period of time, win 3 cups, have 3, 4, maybe even as many as 5 future Hall of Famers pass through. The longer you are good, the worse the eventual blowout is going to be, the worse the eventual payment is going to be. You get anxious about doing something, so you keep pushing it off. And then all of a sudden, damn, I really should have gotten to this sooner. And that's the case. After the Penguins lost to the Rangers in 2022, there was an argument to be made right then. Okay, we probably need to take a step back. We probably need to reorient this team. And they kept going for it. And they traded away Gensel, which was the first real sign they were starting over. And now it's simply a matter of who's going to be here 2 or 3 years from now, because they don't really have any foundational pieces for the long term.
No, this team is not really going anywhere, which is when it comes to Sidney Crosby and Malkin, this is a shame, right?
This could be it for Malkin. Last year of his contract, potentially going back to Russia.
It very well could be. I can't even imagine a Penguins team without Malkin or Crosby at this point. But that, next season, we could be talking about, oh my God, this is the first year, in 2 decades that the Penguins don't have Malkin on their starting roster. But this is a team that I just don't see where they get their wins from. Crosby can get you a few wins, sure. Of course, he's still one of the best players in the league. Malkin can get you a few wins, sure, but who else on this team, at least forwards wise and goalie wise, can be Sidney, you take the day off. Evgeny, you take the day off. I'll get you this win. Who on this team can do that consistently? Raquel is a great complimentary piece, and so is Brian Rust, but it's really up to 87 and 71 pretty much every night to lead the charge and not have any days off. And when you do that, you really set yourself up for not a whole lot of success, because there's 12 forwards on a hockey team. And if you only have 2 that are capable of taking over a game, you're not going to win a whole lot. And this team just, there's not a whole lot here for me to get excited about. I think Owen Pickering can be good. I think Justin Brazeau can be something. I think Tommy Novak can be something. But overall, you take one look at this roster and you go, okay, well, are they beating any of the top teams in the Metro? Are they beating any of the top teams in the Atlantic? Can they win a game against Winnipeg? Can they do, and the answer to me, at least, is a resounding no. And I think it's going to get worse in Pittsburgh before it gets better, which is the right thing to do. They really need to restock the cupboards. They need to essentially bottom out and just get as many picks and as many, young faces in there as they can, and really transition to that next phase. I understand that, Penguins fans are starting to get a little, I don't want to say impatient, because they've been kind of doing this for a few years, but this process was delayed, which makes this a lot worse if you're a Penguins fan. If the Penguins started this a few years ago when the cracks were starting to show, maybe they would have retooled and revitalized themselves. Maybe they would have been, back in a potential playoff spot this year.
They could have done the Washington.
Right, exactly. But they waited too long. They kept pushing. They kept trading away things that they really didn't have to trade away. It didn't work. And now here they are, multiple years after their last, real playoff spot. And it's going to get worse. This is a team that's not going anywhere, and I kind of have them dead last, even below Philly.
Oh, I do as well. I think Pittsburgh is clearly the worst team in this division. It wouldn't shock me if Pittsburgh ended up with the best odds to win the lottery. I think this goalie room is really bad. I think this defense is really bad. I think a first-time head coach and a whole lot of third and fourth liners to make up a forward group. This is a really rough combination of circumstances. I think the only way this gets interesting is if Crosby becomes open to moving. And look, that's not even to say if he were open to it, the Penguins would do it. But other than that, you're playing for next year. And there's no worse place to be as a fan, especially in hockey or baseball, where the season is so goddamn long, to know before the season even starts, nothing that happens this year matters. It is entirely about what happens down the road. It's the worst place to be. And look, the Penguins got their cups. They got the Hall of Famers. They'll have the jersey retirements. They'll have all of the accolades from this era. But finding their way out of the wilderness here is going to be the franchise's goal. You know, if we're 5 years from now and they're still kind of on the periphery of getting back into the playoffs, that's not really that implausible. You know, post Crosby, post Malkin, it's not impossible the Penguins outright stink for 4 or 5 years. You do not get over losing inner ring hockey Hall of Famers in a short period of time. You know, franchises, I was talking about this the other day with someone about McDavid. Franchises go their entire existence. You know, the NHL is be 110 years old next year. There are 30 franchises that will never in their existence, like as long as we have a professional hockey league, have a player as good as Sidney Crosby on their team. Like, that's not hyperbole. Other than the Oilers, who have had Gretzky and McDavid, if you want to say McKinnon maybe for Colorado, okay, 30 of the 32 teams in our league will never have a player as good as Sidney Crosby. And that's just it. That's the end of that sentence. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is one of the best players you will ever see. And a team does not get over recovering from that. You know, you think about the Oilers in the 90s after you lose Gretzky and Messier in short order. It takes them 10 and a half years to get out of the wilderness. Don't be surprised if the Penguins are bad for a really long time whenever Crosby and Malkin do eventually move on. This, of course, brings us to a team closely linked to the Penguins. They've had quite a few interesting playoff series over the years. The Islanders, who came in under their over-under total last year, who are finally embracing the fact that it is no longer 2021, that Matthew Darsh understands they needed to get younger, they needed to get cheaper, and they're going to take it on the chin. This group, as good as I think Ilya Sorokin is, he is just a goalie. Beyond Barzal, beyond Horvat, this forward group is extremely unremarkable. It is really, really top heavy. And the really only difference between this group and Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh has the goalie. The Islanders have the goalie and Pittsburgh doesn't.
The Islanders, of course, don't have Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, but look, Horvat Barzal is reasonable enough that it gets you within shouting distance of Malkin and Crosby, but this team is really, really blah. I said this before about Rick Tocchet. There's a part of me that's very curious to see if Patrick Waugh understands the assignment here, or if he's stubbornly going to cling to playing the overmatched bad old players, trying to, look, I'm trying my best. We're in the mix for a playoff spot. And look, again, real quick as an aside, I'll say this 4 more times this episode. The Metro was so bad last year, the Islanders were in the mix for a playoff spot until the end. They were right there with the Rangers, and the Islanders were friggin' horrendous last year. This is a team that called Tony DeAngelo, who was playing in the KHL, and said, bro, we need you bad. Do you understand how bad your team has to be defensively that you are calling guys playing in the KHL to come in and play? Not like as a 7th or an AHL guy. Like, no, you're getting off the plane and you're playing the next game. That is how bad the Islanders were defensively last year. Look, they drafted first overall. Anytime you draft a defenseman first overall, it's a little harder to get a return on your investment. As good as Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power are, as good as Aaron Ekblad is, I would say he's definitely a tier below the prior 2 guys I just said.
Injuries kind of hurt him too, which
he's had a solid NHL career, but not what you want from first overall. And that's really the key here with Schaefer, who is going to take it on the chin. We know defensemen develop slower. The Islanders have been a mess defensively for much of the last 2 years. It's kind of been the defining problem for them when they had Lambert, now under Waugh, who has really grinded them into a low interest team where the games are a slog to keep the score close in hopes that they're individual talents can overcome them. But this team is really mediocre. I think they're clearly in this mix with the Penguins and Flyers. I wouldn't be surprised if the Islanders finished dead last. Really, the only thing saving them from being that bad is Sorokin, who wasn't great last year, but I still think is pretty good and good enough that he should keep them from being an absolute joke. That's really the only difference. If they had a bad goalie, this team would be in dire straits.
Yeah, I don't, there's a couple of names of the Islanders that I'm interested in seeing. Obviously, Matthew Schaefer, who looked good in his first preseason game. I have no idea how Max Shabanov is going to play. Like, that's a name that I'm curious to see how he meshes well at the NHL level. I like the Emil Heineman pickup for the Islanders. I like the Joanne pickup. Like, there's certain elements of this team where I go, okay, like, there's improvement here. There's a little bit of a better roster on paper than what we saw before. And I don't think they finished dead last because they actually have a goaltender, because Philly does not have one. Pittsburgh does not have one. So at least, and listen, Sorokin did not have a great year last year. Every Islanders fan can tell you that. It's not a secret or anything. But at the end of the day, I would still take him over anybody the Penguins or the Flyers have currently. Then I would still take Sorokin for sure. So I think Sorokin's going to win them a few games. I don't think they finished at last. They will. I have them sixth right now in my predictions, just because like this is a team that like they're not going to be as bad, I don't think, but there's just nobody that is a difference maker to that level. Barzal could do it. Bo Horvat could do it. But again, I'm just repeating myself from Pittsburgh. It's okay. Well, if not those guys, and I know Anders Lee's a good player too. Don't get me wrong. And please don't ride outside my house or anything. But when push comes to shove, who on this Islanders team can say, okay, it's a 1-1 game, it's a 2-2 game. If it's not Barzal, if it's not Horvat, if it's not sometimes Anders Lee, who can do it? And maybe Shabanov can do it. I don't know enough about him. The Islanders are super high on this guy, so maybe he's the X factor for them. Because if Shabanov is the guy that the Islanders think that he is, maybe that unlocks them to get to a higher tier, because this, like you said, like this division, there's so many question marks. This team could be good or they could be really bad, and there's kind of this wide range of outcomes in this division that I could see there be a scenario in which things actually go well for the Islanders and they either compete for a playoff spot or they're in a playoff spot. Like that could happen. Or like you said, the wheels could fall off. I think if it finish dead last. There's a wide variety of potential things that could happen with this team. And right now I have them 6, but they just don't have, I think, what it takes to get to a playoff spot, but maybe they surprise.
Yeah, I think they're really stuck, and it's going to take a year or two for them to get where they want to go. They've got to age some of these guys out, find replacements, and look, Drouin's fine as a stopgap, and that's really where they are. They're in a holding pattern right now. They're trying to get to whatever the next iteration of this team is. I think 81.5, whatever it was, it seems a little high. I think 84.5, I think that's high for what this group is. I think I would go under there. Next up, we'll get to the Rangers, and again, we'll do a full Rangers preview next week. But I was thinking about this last night when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to say about the Rangers, because I like to plan out my big ideas in advance. And one of the prevailing sentiments about the Rangers this past season, at least amongst the national media, not amongst Ranger fans, Rangers media, was, well, Chris Drury hasn't really remade the roster. It's not his team. It's not fair to judge him on the results of a roster he doesn't assemble. My counterpoint to those people has been, then does he get credit for them making the conference finals and winning the President's Trophy, or does that go to Jeff Gordon? Because it's not both. He
Right.
can't be, it's not his team. Why do you want him fired? He didn't put this team together. Well, then he doesn't get the credit for the positive results they've had over the last 2 years. It doesn't take a vision. I could have traded for Barclay Goodrow, Ryan Reeves, signed Patrick Nemeth. That's what you would expect from someone who doesn't know what they're doing. But at the same time, you look at this situation now, and the likening I have made to this There are a few ways to make this metaphor toothpaste out of the tube. I'm a big fan of saying the curtain's revealed, the Wizard of Oz, he's just a guy, he's not in the orb. That's what the Rangers are. You know that this group is one bad game away from a death spiral. You know this group is one bad game away from JT Miller throwing a temper tantrum. And you know that
That's Captain JT Miller to you and I, Nick.
Yeah, Captain JT, that's great. We're in the era.
And they have the no BS shirts now, so that's how you know.
We are in the era of the performative male, and in the hockey space, it's not so much matcha and labubus. It's saying things like no BS. What do you mean you have to have what? My no BS shirt is asking a lot of questions about the BS we've tolerated here over the years. If you have to come out and say, we're not going to tolerate it anymore. Well, yeah, you shouldn't have in the first place.
Right.
If you let it fester for 2 or 3 years and get to a breaking point, that's on you, bro. It is not, we don't know. No, you were okay with those little problems because the team was winning. You scoffed at everybody who said, well, this doesn't seem that sustainable. You're having a hard time scoring at 5-on-5. You're overly dependent on the power play. Certain players' underlying numbers are starting to dip slowly and over time. You're one bad injury away. You're one power play regression away from being a not good team. And then everything that didn't happen for those 3 years, the prior 3 years, it all happened at once. And the bottom absolutely fell out. Absolute miserable. Sure. I keep going back to, there was the Saturday matinee game against the Kings where they lost like 7-1, 7-2, something like that. And the tickets were like $220 to get in. And the game was over 5 minutes into the game. And then they kept running up the score, and they kept running up the score. And I remember there was a face-off with like 10 or 11 minutes to go. And coming out of commercial, Micheletti said something along the lines of, the good news is this game will be over in 10 minutes. And when you're getting to that point where even the Homer broadcasters, who, look, we love Sam and Joe dearly, we'll miss them.
Of course. When
the Homer broadcasters are even like, this sucks, can we please go home? I think that tells you a lot. And if your big solution here is another guy to scream and yell, in addition to the general manager, who we know likes to scream and yell at people, and we know this group doesn't really respond well to that. You think about all the memes about like your dad helping you with your homework when you're like 8 and him making you cry because, what do you mean you don't get it? It's really easy. Well, Dad, I don't understand. That's kind of the vibe here. I can't see this group responding particularly well to JT Miller's tough love shtick. I can't. We know it doesn't work. We have seen them try this with this group. And look, the Rangers will be fine. I think they're probably a fringe playoff team, but we're just kicking the can down the road on the problems here. What is the point of this season? If you cannot win the Stanley Cup, how are you getting closer to winning the Stanley Cup? And everybody getting a year older and then putting Brett Berard in the Taylor Radish spot next year, that's not exactly moving me. Okay, Will Cooley goes from 23 to 30 goals. Okay. Will Cooley is not the difference between this team where they are and where they want to be. There is a fundamental lack of high-end talent here. As good as you think Panarin, Shesterkin, and Fox are, Florida's got 6 of those guys. The Oilers have 3 or 4 of those guys. The Golden Knights have 3 or 4 of those guys. The Jets, the Avalanche, the Stars. You are at best the 11th or 12th best team in the NHL. How do you get to the top 5? Then you have a chance. If you're one of the 5 best teams, you got a chance. Right now, their over-unders at 95.5. If you think they're going to make the playoffs, you take the over. If you think they're going to miss, you go under. That's probably going to be the cutoff point, about 95, 96 points this year.
We'll talk about this next week when we do a full-on Rangers, preview and kind of break down everything about, everything about this team. But I think you're right. And I think, a lot of the early speculation already, which happens every year with this team specifically. And this is famously what they were doing prior to there being a salary cap. But there's been a lot of speculation about Kaprizov because he didn't sign his ridiculous contract in Minnesota. He said no. There's been a lot of speculation about McDavid leaving Edmonton. I think that one's more of a pipe dream. I think that one is a more of an NHL franchise mode type of decision. But I think Kaprizov is probably leaving Minnesota if he said no to that, all inspiring contract. So he's probably at the door, and I think the Rangers will be a big factor in that conversation. But that's not for this season. That's for next season and beyond. As for right now, I like Panarin a lot. I like JT Miller. I like Lafreniere. If he bounces back, this is going to be a big year for him. And I think if he continues to kind of, try to spin those wheels in the mud, I think there might be a case for the Rangers to potentially trade him. I don't know who would want him. And again, that's another situation where the Rangers are going to sell low on somebody. They sold low on JT Miller, and even then they got a really good on Keandre Miller, I should say. And even then they got probably the best package they could have gotten out of Carolina in return for Keandre Miller, even with his stock being lower than you would have liked to when trading a player of that caliber. So I think the rest of the league understands where Lafreniere could be, and if he doesn't do it again this year, then there's an argument to be had that maybe it's time to move on. I don't know. We'll cross the bridge when we get to it. It's a matter of, okay, well, the guys that were broken last year and didn't want to play, and just like didn't want to win games are still kind of here, and they are immovable, right? And these guys are I mean, even the blue line, we'll talk about it later, next week. It's still Susie Borgen. It's still Vakanainen. Braden Schneider looks buff. I mean, my man's looks chiseled, which is awesome. But is that going to help him defend better? I don't know the answer.
You know who else famously looked good without a shirt that the Rangers got tired of? Keandre Miller. The Rangers got very tired of the Jack dude who wasn't playing very well. So there's a lot
of questions here that I think they will bounce back. I don't think there's no way that everything goes bad a second year in a row. When everything under the sun doesn't go your way, the next year, at least some things will be better. That's, the regression back to the mean, as you like to say, Nick. Like everything just kind of will go back. Out. Yeah, it will even out, and I think they will look like a better team. And I think, maybe some of that will be on Mike Sullivan. Maybe some of that will be on JT Miller, the captain of this team, being a captain and doing captain things with his captaincy on his sweater and being the captain and interviewing as a right? Like you get the point. Like there's ways that this team could bounce back and will bounce back and will potentially be a playoff team, but there's a lot of questions still with this roster that I just don't know how to answer.
Yeah, and like you said, we'll get to it more in depth next week, but as a team that's pretty veteran heavy, they brought in Taylor Radish because they weren't the most, I would say, I guess, trustworthy of one of Berard, Othman, or Perreault really sticking. I think there's a good chance Perreault at least starts the year in the AHL. Othman's kind of running out of runway here, and I hate to be that guy, but at this point, he was drafted 4 years ago, and he's still can't get in the lineup consistently. And this was somebody who we were all kind of impressed was still there at 15th overall. I think quite famously about when the Rangers drafted Othman, Jay Fresh tweeted his NHLE, which was I think 1% chance of being a star, 5% chance of being an NHL regular. And I remember quote tweeting it and saying, I guess I'll just kill myself now. And that's kind of where I'm getting with this team. All of the effort, all of the time over the last few years, and all we have to show for it is 2 gut-wrenching losses in playoff series to teams from the state of Florida that the Rangers had leads in games that they eventually blew. The general manager does not project confidence. I think, if anything, the fact he continues to hire people around him who do not have experience tells you how important him maintaining control is to everything. I am quite skeptical of the Rangers' ability to do anything other than relying on that positive regression. Like you said, the power play's 4 or 5% better. That gets them back in the playoffs. That should be doable.
Yeah.
David Quinn got the Penguins from 28th to, I think, 7th year over year on the power play. He should be able to get this power play group into the mid-teens. That's enough to get them in the playoffs. And if they get a division spot, they probably play the Devils in the first round. If they get a wild card, Carolina or Florida, that's a really tough sledding first round. Speaking of the Devils, we're going to get there in a minute. Next up is Columbus, who we both kind of like. We both expect Columbus to take another step purely because they have so many guys with upside, like of Kent Johnston, Fantilli, Marchenko. Some of those guys will continue to improve. Werenski was a point per game player as a defenseman last year, which kind of came out of nowhere. The only thing holding me back from saying this team is definitely a playoff team is the goaltending. And that's what it's been for a lot of the last few years. This is a really interesting team. I think Dean Evison has established himself as a pretty solid NHL coach. His tenure in Minnesota went reasonably well. I think they should make the playoffs, but I wouldn't bet on it because that goaltending room is rancid. But there's enough.
I like Jack Reeves, by the way, that's he's kind of he's the biggest X factor on that team right now. Is okay. Well, Jack Reeves showed us something at the end of last season when he got that run. Is he going to be a Devin Levy type of player where, he showed some promise very early on and then has struggled since then? Or is Jack Reeves going to show, wait, no, I'm for real. You better respect me. He's the X factor because if he's for real, this is a dangerous team.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Like we were saying at the outset, the East is not good. Beyond Florida, beyond Tampa, Toronto, there are spots here for the taking if you want to take them. And Columbus, if you want to take one, by all means, come and take one. The opportunity is here for you.
This is a team that I really like. I love their additions. I love their ceiling. I think they have a high floor, but a high ceiling as well. I don't think they're going to bottom out. I mean, they have too much talent on this team, too much young talent on this team to really bottom out. The only way I can see that happening is if Jet Greaves gets injured and Marchenko gets in. Like if the whole team gets injured, then I can see them, battling for, one of those bottom spots in the Metro. But there's a lot of players here that are here to show not only to themselves and to Columbus, but to the rest of the NHL that we are serious. And by the way, they won 6 in a row to end the year. Last year, they were really good at the end of last year. Their young guys were really firing on all cylinders. Jack Reeves looked really good. This was a team that has they have a lot of confidence now. They're a team that now is beginning to understand how to properly win games. And Werenski's amazing. There's a lot of underlying talent on this team. The blue line's a little bit shaky with Eric Branson in there, and Ivan Provorov can sometimes just not play defense. But there's enough talent here that I would comfortably say that barring, something unforeseen happening, this is a playoff team.
Yeah, Columbus should make the playoffs. I would be disappointed if they didn't, because they have the capacity to be really exciting. If Fantilli takes another step, that should be a 60, 70-point guy if he's right. You have that in addition to Marchenko. Kent Johnston was in the high 50s or low 60s for points. There's enough here that you should be at least curious, if not outright excited for where they're going. They have work to do. They're a little veteran heavy in the bottom 6 and on the back end where they probably could use more upside. But I think the addition of Charlie Coyle tells you that they think they're ready. And look, I'm not saying Charlie Coyle's a major bellwether, but a responsible third line defensive center who's got a little bit of offense, 15, 20 goals. That's usually one of the last things you try and get before you make your playoff run. And they're in a position where they should be able to make some noise this year. And speaking of making some noise, that'll bring us to the Devils, who have made noise 2 times in the last 15 years, both times. Really, really good stories. The first time Taylor Hall won the MVP, but maybe the most improbable MVP of the last 10 to 15 years. And then 2 years ago, they beat the Rangers in the first round with a really young, exciting team. And it's really straight up for the Devils. Are you guys drinking your milk? Are you stretching? Are you doing your calisthenics? If you stay healthy, you can win this division. If you stay healthy, Jack Hughes can win an MVP. He is that good. Jesper Bratt can be an 80-point forward. Nico Hischier can be a 60, 70-point forward with elite defense. Can you unlock whatever isn't working for Timo Meier? You have enough guys in your top 6 that you should be a pretty good hockey team. Your defense is loaded. If you stay healthy between Dougie Hamilton, Luke Hughes, Nemitz, Siegenthaler, the guys they signed last year like Pesci and Brendan Dillon, you still have Seamus Casey, who hasn't really played a lot in the NHL but has played in spurts here and there. You have Markstrom, who has put together a really solid NHL career.
Sure.
This is probably the best team in this division on paper. But being that we play games on the ice and not on paper, I still think Carolina is going to end up winning this division, but I think this Devils team, if they can stay healthy, should make some noise. And they'll run into issues in the playoffs. I think their talent and their style is a little more conducive to put regular season than postseason. But this team should be good. Like it'll be firing times if they are not good this year. Tom Fitzgerald, this is it, man. If you don't make the playoffs this year, you're going to get shit canned. I think there's a world where Sheldon Keefe, if they don't make the playoffs, he gets fired for that too. This team is as leveraged as they can be on the present. Yes, they have a lot of their guys like Hughes, Bratt, Heischer on deals that are going to go for a little while longer. But it is time to make something happen now.
Right.
We have been talking about the Devils as an exciting young team for several years now. It is time to get some return on what you have put in.
No, I totally agree. I think they are a dangerous team if they stay healthy. The problem is that if has not been functional for them for the last couple of years now. Hughes getting hurt. Dougie Hamilton continues to not be able to play long-term games because he gets injured quite consistently. There's so much talent on this team, and yet we haven't really been able to see it in full force because of how bad their team gets hit with injuries year in, year out the last few years. But I do think that eventually, right, surely you would think, and again, another regression to the mean of surely this is the year that they finally at least be they're going to be relatively healthy, I would think. And if they are relatively this healthy this year, then they're going to win a lot of games. This is a dangerous team. They're a deep team, and they have, really good players on really all fronts of their roster. And I like, I know Devils fans are not happy with Andre Palat, and, for the right reasons. And he's kind of fallen off a cliff the past couple of years for sure. But also, the team hasn't really used him well because they've been needing to force him into the top six because the rest of the lineup has been injured a lot. Like if Andre Palat plays fourth line minutes, then maybe, he can kind of bounce back a little bit. But as he is right now as a player, using him to the top six kind of Palat that we saw in Tampa Bay is maybe a little hopeful. So if the Devils can actually, for once in the past 3 or 4 years, stay healthy, then they will win a good amount of games and they will comfortably make a playoff spot, and we'll see where it goes from there. But if the wheels start to fall off again, they will fall off. They will veer on this. One will end up in a bush, the other one will end up in a river, and everybody gets fired.
They are I can't say they're at an organizational crossroads because they do still have so much trajectory, but at the same time, guys will start to get fired if there isn't a return on the results. And they have enough guys that they should be able to look. They overcame injuries last year, still made the playoffs, even though they limped in. I think that's a real testament to just how bad this division was last year, that the Devils were dead for the entire second half of the season, and they still made the playoffs. But that brings us to Carolina, who finished second, who I think is probably the most bankable team in this division as far as consistency. They took some interesting calculated risks on Nick Ehlers and Keandre Miller. I don't think Ehlers fits what they do at all. He is a carry the puck through the neutral zone, bob and weave, attack off the rush. Carolina is a dump and chase, grind you into a pulp. I think Carolina is a good team. I think ultimately Carolina, very much like the Leafs, will be judged on what they do in the postseason. I think this team should make the playoffs. I think they can beat most of the teams they would come up against in the earlier rounds. I still don't think they're going to fare particularly well against the Floridas of the world, but this is a really good hockey team with a really solid coach that's got a lot of depth. It could use a little more upside. I think that's my only real critique of of Carolina and the roster they have. They don't really have anybody young and ascending. Other than that, this is a really good team. I have no real critiques other than their playoff results.
That's kind of it for Carolina is okay. Yeah, I mean they're going to win a bunch of games. I kind of have them winning the division. I think they're going to be a really solid team, and there's not too many holes with this roster. The question becomes, okay, well, come game 83, you're going to win. You're gonna do some stuff. Like they're gonna probably win the first round. They might win the second round. Okay, but come the conference final, dog, you gonna win a game in the conference final, or are you gonna get swept again and again and again and again? Like is at a certain point, regular season success is great. Winning 2 playoff rounds every year is nothing to sneeze at. You're gonna win one game in the conference final at some point. What have they lost, like 12 or 13 or some crazy number in a row? Like they've been swept out of the conference finals multiple times now in a row. And and at this point, some of it is definitely mental than it is anything else, because in some of those games, they did not look like the Carolina Hurricanes that we know them to be. So, some of that definitely isn't about the team on paper. It's about what's going through their heads. And that definitely plays a factor in it. But at the same time, eventually you got to do something. If you keep making it there, you got to at least win a game, please. Like for the sake of your own fans, win a conference finals game. I think that, I don't want to say that's the goal for them, but if you're going to make it back there, you got to win another game. Like you have to win one game in the conference finals. Otherwise, is that the ceiling for this team? Is just make it there and then have a good year? Like I don't know if I like that for them.
They're in a weird spot like that where you start to get down to what actually matters. And Carolina's easily could get back to the conference finals. Nobody's going to pick them to beat Florida if they're playing Florida. I think, granted, I don't think anyone's picking anyone if they're playing Florida, but at the same time, this Carolina team in particular has been exposed by teams even less dominant than Florida. The Rangers have gotten the better of them on 2 occasions, and the Rangers have their own playoff warts to address. So that'll bring us to the team that finished first in this division last year, a team that most people, I think, expect to regress to some degree coming off of the Ovi goal chase hangover. The Washington Capitals, who were right in the mix there for the President's Trophy with the Jets up until the end. They had their young guys like Protas and Connor McMichael take real steps. Dylan Strome continued this mid-career renaissance. Pierre-Luc Dubois played some of the best hockey he's played in a long time. Ovi still had 40 goals, even though he missed like 2 months with a broken leg. This team, Jacob Chikrin had almost 20 as a defenseman. They got great goaltending out of Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren. I think this team is really well set up for the regular season. I don't think they're set up particularly well for the playoffs. I expect them to be in the mix for a playoff spot, but I think more likely than not, they are going to be a first or a second round exit. I think they really were the beneficiaries of a weird year last year. But there's enough talent here that you could talk yourself into that. If Ryan Leonard is a mini Tom Wilson, another 25, 30 goal guy, 50, 60 points, a bit of a pain in the ass to play against. Okay, you can talk me into them. If McMichael takes another step, if Protas takes another step, there's enough here that you could see the Capitals staying in the upper crust of this division. I don't think they will, but it's certainly possible. There is more than enough here that they can be an interesting team.
I'm kind of low on them, and I think I don't want to say they overachieved last year because they were a good team, but yeah, I mean, there's everything that could have went well for them kind of did. Like Ovechkin scoring 40 even while missing 2 months with a broken leg is not repeatable at his age. Like that's not something that you would bank on. If you were given the bet right now, how much money are you putting down? I wouldn't. Not at his age, not at the type of mileage that he's had. He's maybe you would make that bet because he's Ovechkin. Maybe you wouldn't make that bet for anybody else in the league, but because he's Ovi, you would, and that's fair enough. I can you could convince me of that, but I don't see how, because a lot of last year they were a good team. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of it was riding on vibes. It was a very vibes team. Everybody was having a great time. Everyone was vibing. Everyone was gelling well. They were having some of the puck luck, and they stayed relatively healthy for the year. Their goaltending was rock solid last year, and I kind of just see a regression a little bit. And, what that means standings points wise kind of remains to be seen. But I don't know if vibes can carry them as hard as they did last year. And also, you mentioned at the beginning, Washington beat up on the Metro last year, which was one of, if not the worst division in hockey, because every team was just so bad. There was like 3 playoff spots available in March that nobody wanted. That's how bad everybody was. And Washington, because they're in that same division and they wanted the playoff spot and they wanted to win games, which is shocker, good team wants to win games, which didn't really happen last year for a lot of teams. They beat up on a lot of those struggling teams, and they got to the number playoff number, the standings number that they got. So I don't see them having the same kind of success this year. It's difficult for me to rank them in the prediction of where they will land because there's so many question marks of everybody else. And it's like, okay, well, I could see them winning the division. I could see them being 5th. Like, there's so many different spots that I don't know how to rank them in, like, with a lot of confidence. But there's a lot here that I love their blue line. Their blue line is great. I really love their blue line. The question becomes, okay, well, can the forward group stay consistently hot? And can their goalie stay consistently hot? That's my 2 biggest questions for them.
They've got a really well-rounded group. There aren't a lot of weaknesses. It's just how high of a peak can they get to. It's a pretty solid group. And I like their young guys a lot. I think Protas has a lot of juice, honestly. He's big, he's fast, He took a real leap. And then Ryan Leonard is somebody we're all relatively bullish on. We saw what he did playing with Perreault and playing with Celebrini. That team was incredible, and we shall see what happens ultimately there. But real quick, run me through your 1 through 8.
8, I have Pittsburgh. 7, I have Philadelphia. 6, I have the Islanders. 1 through 5, I am guessing. Like, this is, all predictions are guesses, but these are essentially just, I'm throwing darts. Please, no pitchforks. Please, no pitchforks. Like, I'm not confident in any of these 5. Number 5, I do have Washington. Just be by virtue of the other 4 teams continuing to either get better or stay better. And I think Washington is going to regress because they can't beat up on as many teams as they would before. 4, I have the Rangers. 3, I have Columbus. I think they will get that 3rd spot. I think Jack Reeves has shown me enough to suggest that he can sustain that level of play, and I think I'm pretty high on Jack Reeves. Number 2, I have the Devils. I think they finally stay healthy, and because they stay healthy, they will end up with one of those division spots. And number 1, I have Carolina. I mean, this is they love winning all these games in the regular season just to play out in the playoffs. So I don't see that changing for them this time around.
Okay, I have Pittsburgh dead last. I have the Islanders 7th.
Wow, okay.
I have Philadelphia 6th. I have Washington 5th. I have the Rangers. Actually, no. I have Columbus 4th. I have the Rangers 3rd. I have the Devils 2nd and Carolina 1st. I think the Rangers are going to be enough that it will buy everybody a little bit more time. But next week, we will do a full-on dive. We'll get a little bit deeper into what we've seen so far, the combinations, the pairs, the Shesterkin quick workload, what Mike Sullivan style-wise means for this group, and a whole lot of other more philosophical conversations as well. We're on the horizon, folks. 2.5 weeks to go. The first game,
preseason hockey yesterday.
There was football on, man. There were maybe.
I'm saying in the context of there was hockey to be watched. It wasn't great hockey and it didn't count, but there was hockey on TV, which is more than I could say for the past 3 months.
Fair enough. Andrew and I will see you guys next week. I guess watch a preseason game if you want. I wouldn't. I think there are probably better things to do. You could do some laundry. Call your parents.
Yeah.
Do that.
Often shoulder the guy in the head. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't. Especially in a preseason game. Like if you're gonna get suspended, at least do it in a game that matters. But that's neither here nor there. We'll see you guys soon.
Later.